You like movies about gladiators?
Those men wanted to have sex with me!
Great Scott!
Nice beaver.
Cinderella boy.
Ramble is a pussy.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGhee.
I'm George McGhee.
And this week, we're bringing a special edition of this podcast for a special person, the recent passing of Sir Roger Moore. Now, for George and I, Bond has been a very big part of our lives, and we are definitely going to get around to covering each of the films in their entirety and giving them the respect that is due.
All of the films?
Eventually. But such an important Bond. Like everybody else, we discovered Bond through a combination of our dad's VHS collection, or with them being shown on, like it is this weekend because we're recording on a bank holiday, on ITV. And I don't know what to say. I guess I wasn't expecting him to be the first Bond to pass, and I'm just very sad. He was such a charismatic guy, and that's why it's so important to us to dedicate an entire episode to him. So I'm very moved by this news, and I know George is, and that's why today we're going to be looking back at his career. George has been doing some research on the other roles. I really, to be completely honest, I know him a little bit from The Saint, but mainly my input will be on his time as the great James Bond. So, George, where do you start with something like this?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think, it's safe to say that our memories are all based around the character of Bond. I don't think I've ever seen more than 5 minutes of an episode of The Saint. I very recently stumbled across an episode of The Persuaders, so I watched that, and it was enjoyable in a sort of, 70s kind of sort of UK series at the time.
What was The Persuaders about?
They were kind of like chances. So it was Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, and I think they were both sort of like millionaire playboys that were solving crimes, and almost a bit like I don't think they're mercenaries, but yeah, it was a bit like The Saint. And a bit like Jack Reacher, they would sort of find themselves in random situations and help people out. But it was a very light, sort of happy-go-lucky.
It's kind of like a two-man A-team.
Yeah, two charming guys, solving sort of crimes, I suppose. I think, anyway. It was hard to tell from the episode I was watching. But I actually read his autobiography a few years ago, the amazingly titled "My Word Is My Bond."
Well, yeah, I like it. It could have called it More Bond.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a great read. He's a great raconteur, and I was gutted when I heard the news the other day, because I was actually planning to see him. He was on a tour last year, sort of towards the end of the year, and it was like an evening with Roger Moore. And effectively, he was going around various sort of venues, and he was just being interviewed, and he was just recounting stories. And sadly, due to work commitments, I couldn't be there. And yeah, now obviously I'm kicking myself, because that would have been sort of obviously the last chance, to see the man in the flesh. And yeah, he's a great raconteur. And as I really do heartily recommend you check out his books. He's written 2 Bond books, so there's his autobiography, which is My Word Is My Bond, but he also did, I think, for all the anniversaries around Skyfall, he released a book called Bond on Bond, where he reviews all of the Bond films.
I still need to check that out, yeah.
Which is great. I mean, it's just a few anecdotes here and there, and it's great to see his thoughts on the legacy of Bond, all the different actors. But yeah, in terms of who Roger Moore was, he was born and raised in Stockwell, in not far from where I used to live in London, which is quite bizarre because of, you hear his accent, and I think that was something that was created. His sort of South London sort of Cockney accent was filed down during his drama school days.
Miss Anders, I didn't recognise you with the clothes on.
He ended up being at RADA, but I think he was introduced into acting via a film director. Bizarrely, his dad was a a policeman and was investigating a robbery at a film director's house, got chatting to the film director and realised his son was struggling with his career and introduced them. So he sort of fell into it very randomly.
Took one look at Roger and just went, oh my God, he's so handsome.
And look at that handsome man and those amazing eyebrows.
Women want him, men want to be him.
The director probably thought, I want to sleep with that man. He had a bunch of sort of like as any struggling actor did on various sort of studio sort of extra roles, like background extras, but because as you say, of his strong looks, of his his immense charm, he really he sort of got noticed by various different people. And whilst he sort of in his early days he started off as a knitwear model, so modelling sweaters, cardigans, which
gotta start somewhere.
I think both I think it was Michael Caine, because they
used to rip it out of him.
Yeah, they called him the Big Knit, was his nickname, and I think Roger referred it to himself that as well. But yeah, he ended up in a bunch of TV roles before The Saint or The Persuaders. He started off in Ivanhoe, which was a kids' TV show in the UK, so of a historical romp sort of series, and he did that for quite a long time, and that was enough to get him noticed in America, because I think they did some filming over in America for it. And I never knew this, or must have forgotten about it in My Word Is My Bond. But he was a recurring guest star on the Western series Maverick.
Of course, with James Garner, that one, yeah.
Yes, with James Garner, and he was the Maverick brothers' long-lost cousin. I think it was Bo Maverick, the one that had an English accent.
We need to write him in somehow.
So yeah, he cropped up in that a few times, and I think that was obviously got him, really boosted his awareness in the States, which then led on to The Saint. Yeah, again, as we've said, we're not really familiar with the TV show.
All I know from the TV show is apparently he had a look. He had a facial expression that he did, and that apparently was a problem. I don't know if you read that, Jane Seymour.
Yes.
Was it in that?
Yeah.
I think it was in that he had to really concentrate on not making the Saint signature look to the camera.
Yes.
But no, apart from that and that so-so Val Kilmer exploit of the 90s.
I really enjoyed that film at the time.
I enjoyed it. He's a race car. Nobody runs him. Val Kilmer
in
a great job.
In a variety of bad disguises.
Just a weak third act, if I remember. I think it starts off really strong and just
I don't think there was even an obligatory cameo from Sir Roger in that film, if I'm right in thinking.
Maybe there is, and we just missed it.
Maybe.
No, you would have known. No. That. You were a geek back then, George.
That's true.
You would have known.
And apparently on The Saint he even directed a few episodes. On The Persuaders he actively produced it, and at the time he was the highest paid TV star, so he got £1 million for the first series of The Persuaders. So
wow.
He was a big established star before he even was cast as James Bond.
So he kind of invented the whole term of David Schwimmer money.
Yeah, David Schwimmer money.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
So yeah, on to Bond. So he was actually on the producers' radar. So the Bond producers, for those who don't know, was Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. And they were good friends with Roger Moore. He used to play cards with them and would see them socially. And so they were actively after him from early on. And apparently they were trying to cast him. They were scouting for locations for The Man with the Golden Gun, which was going to be the first
post-Connery
after You Only Live Twice. So they were looking at locations in Cambodia, but then Roger couldn't commit because of his TV commitments with The Saint.
That took off, yeah.
And then they scrapped the whole idea of doing Man with the Golden Gun because there was some political unrest in Cambodia. So because of that, they moved on to On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby, the Australian chocolate model. And then after that, obviously it's a bigger sort of story about what happened with Lazenby, but as I was saying to you the other day, when growing up, I always thought that Lazenby was sacked from Bond because
for not being good enough, but it wasn't about that. Yeah.
No, he left because he didn't think Bond was going to last. He thought it was the sort of the area, the time, 69, 70.
Battle of the Bomb, everyone against the bomb, and he grew his hair, he grew his beard, and
Woodstock, and he thought Bond wasn't going to last, and obviously he's been kicking himself ever since. But back to Roger. So they tried to get, after On Her Majesty's and Lazenby Walked, they tried to get Roger again, and this time he was locked into the Persuaders. So they went over to Sean Connery's house with a suitcase full of lots of money
and a toupee
and a new improved toupee for Diamonds Are Forever. So, but then
I just hope that briefcase was delivered by Mr. Kidd
and Mr. Wind, obviously. Hello, Mr. Connery. So then we let's launch into his career as Bond. So 1973, Live and Let Die. Great debut film.
There's so many things to remember from that towards the end of the film, but for me, I love the fact that Bond's in New York. There's that killing with the wing mirror, the wing mirror gun, and there's that whole thing about seeing Mr. Big in as in the blaxploitation era.
It goes without saying, with
flares,
with all the Bond films, they capitalise on what's popular at the time and they feed that in. It's
kite surfing.
They do. They capitalise on a current trend. So with Live and Let Die, there was a huge amount of blaxploitation films out at the time, and whilst the elements of the novel, I don't think any of it's based in Harlem, but I think it's all based in Jamaica.
But they do go to New York. It's just the big
But so obviously it capitalised on the whole blaxploitation thing, and I think, again, people were sharing on Facebook sort of the best Roger Moore quotes, and one of them from Live and Let Die was, "Take this honky outside and waste him." And he goes, "Is that a bad thing?" And I think, for Roger's whole sort of persona as James Bond, he had just that unflappability in the face of danger, whereas you would see, Connery frowning, sweating, whether it's, having a spider climbing into his bed in Dr. No, or a laser going up his jacksie. And, you had Pierce groaning and wincing, and it just seemed like Roger was never really, truly, and excuse the pun, shaken.
His hair was fantastic.
At all times.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that is subconsciously fed into my manner to always be as charming, always to treat even dire situations with a smile,
stay positive.
Kill people with kindness.
Stiff upper lip.
Yes, indeed.
But just to say also on Live and Let Die, there's so much in that film. That is a classic. I remember sitting on the sofa, that Gran was taking care of us, and she says, all you're doing is you keep rewinding the same bit over and over again, and it was the speedboat chase.
That is such a good speedboat chase.
And I just kept it, and she went, you're just watching the same 5 minutes. I was like, yeah, but it's great. It's great. And that was VHS at its best, and there's the bit with Butterhook and him running across
running across the crocodiles. Great stunt.
Poor stunt man.
Well, I think that was a guy that actually owned the crocodile farm.
Yeah.
He was actually called Ross Kananga.
Really?
But
it is a real stunt.
So it was the guy that owned the crocodile farm ran across those crocodiles.
In some great flares and a Roger wig.
In a safari suit. Damn, that man he pulled off that look. Yeah, it's got some great moments in Live and Let Die, that speedboat chase.
I got obsessed with the gadgets. There's a watch with the saw on it.
And the magnetic, it can deflect bullets, it can attract
a spoon from the other side of the room. Yeah. That's one seriously powerful magnet.
A lady's zip on her dress. Yeah, that, and love it or hate it, you've got introduced the sidekick character that survived 2 movies, Sheriff J.W. Pepper.
Yeah, because he's in the man with the golden gun as well.
Yes, so the redneck sheriff. My cousin's speedboat.
But it's such a good scene. There's so much goes on. It is quite long as well, but it's
probably a little bit overlong, but it's a great moment. You've obviously got Baron Samedi, great character there. So then you move on to 1974, The Man with the Golden Gun, which again is capitalizing on the whole kung fu movie movement, Bruce Lee, that sort of thing, the Hong Kong kung fu movies. You can't talk about The Man with the Golden Gun without talking about the brilliant villain that is Scaramanga, Christopher Lee.
Oh, come, Mr. Bond, you disappoint me. You get as much fulfillment out of killing as I do, so why don't you admit it?
I think he'd been sort of chased by the Bond producers for a while to play a villain, and he's perfect foil. In all honesty, The Man with the Golden Gun is a pretty poor film, but it has great performances, great banter between Roger Moore and Christopher Lee.
Very much good nemesis and protagonist against each other. You get the feeling that it's also, I think, what Austin Powers or everybody takes the mickey out of in that is that James Bond is such a good spy that isn't this the one where he gets 007 etched on a bullet and sends it to MI6?
Yes.
Probably postmarked to James Bond at MI6. So not too secret. But yeah, hello, Mr. Bond.
Hello, Mr. Bond.
And Knick-Knack, Tabasco.
Some great moments in that film.
Lasers.
More lasers. It's got the great bridge stunt where they 360 barrel roll the car.
Yeah. Still taking stunts to new heights.
Yeah, and it's got some brilliant Roger moments. I say, Sheriff J.W. Pepper reappears. Roger knocks a small Thai boy off a bridge. Mister, 50 bar. Yeah. And Roger would later go to apologise profusely for that scene because he became, actually, in his later years, a ambassador for UNICEF and a massive campaigner for them. And yes,
and a big pacifist, yeah.
And that's the bizarre thing. Apparently, he had a phobia of guns, playing James Bond, and he hated guns. But yeah, I think I forgot to mention that there was a lot put in place when he came on board as Bond to differentiate it from Connery. Obviously, there was the things like the humour, but I think in Live and Let Die, he had a Magnum instead of the PPK. He smoked a cigar instead of cigarettes. I'm not sure if he does it throughout all his Bond films, but in Live and Let Die, he never orders a martini.
Okay.
And I think he drank whiskey. So there was various things done in place to differentiate. Say, Connery did it better.
And he wasn't demanding black people to bring him his shoes.
Yes, though there probably is some slightly racist tones in Live and Let Die, and The Man with the Golden Gun as well. With the Chinese, the Thais, Hong Kong, all that jazz.
Generally.
Moving on to, I think we would probably say is arguably his best, The Spy Who Loved Me.
But James, I need you.
So does England.
The only criticism I think you can ever level at it is that it's a retelling of
It's You Only Live Twice.
It's You Only Live Twice retold, but apart from that, we were saying we're recording this on a bank holiday. It's on, it's queued up, we're going to watch it tonight.
Definitely.
I love that film. The music.
Disco Bond.
Yeah, Disco Bond. It was awesome. It's one of his best.
It is. I was lucky enough to see in London at Somerset House, which is this huge old, I think, naval building with a big courtyard. Channel 4 does screenings over the summer, so you can come and bring sort of blankets, food, drink, and just watch a film under the stars on a massive screen. And they did Spy Who Loved Me, and the guy who was curating that session that summer introduced Spy Who Loved Me, and he said, people ask me why have I picked Spy Who Loved Me, and I just retorted, why not pick The Spy Who Loved Me? And it was so great watching that film with an audience, obviously, with so many fans. You've got, watching that film with that, it's got one of the best openings, obviously the Union Jack parachutes. Yeah. Everyone was applauding, whooping, hollering.
There was that, to go back to the Empire Group, when people said if you could go back and watch a film in the cinema, I would love to have been in the cinema. To see that at a premiere, oh my God, he's going to die! And then pulls the parachute out. I mean,
the Union Jack parachute.
Yeah.
And it's probably sad to think that if that film was made today, that shot would probably be in the trailer.
Yeah, it would be. They'd ruin it. Marketing would ruin it out of fear.
Yeah. And we're no strangers to Alan Partridge. We slip into Alan Partridge regularly on this podcast, and there is that brilliant sketch of Alan reenacting the whole opening of Spy Who Loved Me and the title song. So yeah, but yeah, it's a great film. It's got Jaws. It's got the gorgeous Barbara Bach.
Gorgeous. And also kind of on the same sort of level. She's the Russian equivalent of him.
Yes.
She's seen the blueprints. It introduces Jaws.
But she's still a woman, and she still gets captured at the end of the film.
Yes, she does become the damsel, unfortunately, at the end. Triple X.
Triple X.
But there's so much. I love the exoticness of that film. I love the fact that they go to so many different places. They're in Egypt and
The car.
yeah, the car, the Lotus. There's the opening. There's that brilliant. The helicopter chase with the really hot girl in it.
Yeah.
Doesn't she pop up in another Bond? I think I read this recently.
Possibly.
The girl in the helicopter. And then obviously Drax. The
Oh, no, that's Moonraker. It's,
what's his name? What's his name? The bad guy.
Strongberg.
Strongberg, yeah. And obviously the introduction of Jaws. This is Jaws. He kills people. No, I mean, there's so much in
the
it.
lift over the shark pool.
Yeah.
It's got loads of the cliches, but again, it's that that Bond bingo. It's getting all that right sort of formula in place. Yeah, the
third act's great. It is a retelling of You Only Live Twice, storming the tanker, but I really enjoy it. And then there's the whole thing of them...
The private armies facing off.
Yeah, the private armies facing off.
Yeah.
But even right to the very end, like the him being in the escape thing, and both MI6, the head of MI6 and the head of the KGB are both, and Desmond Llewellyn are all waiting on the right place on the sub.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Moving on, 1979, Moonraker.
Well,
I was chatting about this with a good friend of mine and fellow Bond fan, Simon, who was saying he loves Moonraker just because, it's not a particularly great film, but there's some great moments in it. You've got the whole subplot with Jaws becoming good.
Yeah.
You've got a fantastic villain with Drax.
Yeah.
He's
a very famous French actor. Yeah.
Was he Michel Lonsdale or something?
Yeah, but he's been like, if you look on cinema, 60s, 70s, 80s cinema, he's in everything. So it's kind of like
Christopher Lee.
Yeah,
the French Christopher Lee.
And also the guy who was picked for Quantum of Solace, another. Who lived on my street in Paris?
Mathieu Amalric?
Yeah, another big. Yeah. So these guys have made their way in French cinema.
Good sort of
solid
actors. Yeah.
But for me, for Moonraker, one of the reasons I kind of enjoy is because it's kind of the last one I picked to watch, and for that reason, it's probably the Bond film I've watched the least, and therefore I don't know it as well. So it has that.
Well, I forget how long it takes them to get into space. There's that whole bit in Venice with the inflatable gondola and the double-taking pigeon and the fight in a glass factory or pressure.
Don't make any noise.
Yeah. There's the whole bit in Rio on the cable car up to the Sugarloaf Mountain.
See, I forget
there's some great sequences. That's all carnival and stuff like that. So it's got some great moments in, but then it turns into, again, capitalising on what was popular. It's a Star Wars rip-off.
Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew. Again, great on
sound effects
on Golden Night, and great sound effects. What else Bond films do is that sort of reaction, that sort of flip-flopping. So when they go too extreme,
a little bit silly,
they flip back again. So after the silliness of Moonraker, and I think that was sort of noted critically, even though I think it was still quite a good big hit box office wise, they went back to basics and went for I think probably Moore's grittiest role in For Your Eyes Only.
Definitely the darkest for me. There's so much of that film
despite
that I like.
The ridiculous opening with the man who can't be called Blofeld for legal reasons. Mr. Bond on a helicopter around Battersea Power Station or something.
It's Birmingham. It's filmed in. I'm thinking. Is it Battersea Power?
I think it's filmed. It's just such a random scene that it just is out of kilter with the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's another. It's a remake of From Russia with Love. Instead of it's like a detecting machine. It's like Elector sort of, and almost sort of You Only Live Twice as well. But it's a great. I really like Fiore's Only. I think it's a lesser seen Bond. It's interesting to see a more dramatic side to Moore, to see him veering into Connery / Craig territory, being a bit of a bastard when kicks that guy's car off the edge of the cliff.
That whole scene, the fact that the timing of that scene's done really well, because there's that thing, it starts off on the docks with the guy with the pistachio nuts.
Is he called Pistachio?
I don't know, I can't remember. It escapes me at this moment, but it starts off in the night, and then you're just like, but hang on, I can remember thinking ahead. He runs up the steps and it's actually dawn.
Yeah,
it's becoming the dawn raid.
Yeah.
And then you've got seeing Roger Moore running, because you've always made a joke about Roger Moore running, and Roger Moore taking the steps.
He runs sort of like bizarrely with his knees locked together, and he sort of crouches down.
You used to say like an old lady.
Yeah, he runs like an old lady. A bit like Seagal, a bit like a fat old lady.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing him, it's probably a stuntman going up those steps somewhere in Greece.
And it's getting slightly lighter and lighter and lighter, but the continuity is done really well.
And you've got that whole great tense sequence at the end where they're climbing
that rock.
That monastery type thing. Again, I just really remember, the sound effects in that film were really good, like really good sort of Foley work, like the sort of the rock sort of crampon, sort of the pick things that they're putting
of course,
in.
when he's scaling up and there's that guy coming down.
Doesn't he sort of scale up using his shoelaces?
Yes, he has to use his shoelace at one point.
Fine.
I'll put that in the back pocket in case I ever need it.
Yeah, but I think they stripped down the gadgets in that one because it was just getting a little bit too silly. But then I think again,
because his car gets blown up at the very start as well.
Yeah, the Lotus.
The Lotus, because the guy tries to break into it and it just explodes.
Is that when someone's having a very sexy party?
Yeah, very sexy.
Some more disco there. Then it flops again back into silliness with Octopussy. I probably have seen. Octopussy the least in most recently. I watched as a kid. We watched it loads. I remember
we watched the first 20 minutes. Well, that bit with the plane at the beginning is amazing.
Great opening where he's got he's a Cuban general, and then the jacket that reverses, the plane that comes out, the horse box.
Yeah,
it's a great opening, and then
he looks so comfortable in the role,
and then ends up with him dressed as Bubbles the Clown or something.
Yeah. That film fell apart, but it showed that he was invested in the franchise.
Yeah, he realised he was always very comfortable in the role. He didn't look like he was phoning it in, like a lot of people have accused Connery of in his later years, in Diamonds or You Only Live Twice, and Craig pretty much anything after Casino Royale.
Yeah,
he just doesn't seem very happy at all. But there's probably moments, and I think this is a strength of Moore as an actor, that he was very self-deprecating. He knew he wasn't the best actor. I mean, I think he famously said, "I have two acting styles. I have the left eyebrow and the right." But he always he was a compelling watch. He was always a compelling presence on screen. So if the film was poor, you could still get it through on his performance.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that North Sea hijack film, Folks, whatever it is.
Oh, so one of his films that he did around the same time.
Yeah, he doesn't need a license to kills even in the trailer. We'll put it on the blog. It's hilarious.
Yeah, so we were scrolling through looking at his non-Bond work, and there's one film called North Sea Hijack, which was made around the same time as For Your Eyes Only, and he's counter-terrorism.
Part of a counter-terrorism
unit. And it's a classic old school 80s trailer where it gives away the whole plot in about 5 minutes.
We even see I don't even want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but let's just say you see a crucial element of Act 3 happening.
Yes.
But it also has James Mason. No, it's a funny film.
So yeah, we'll put that on the blog. So, and then his Bond tenure finishes with Love It or Hate It. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure.
Oh, we love it. We fucking love that film.
A View to a Kill.
Commas on every word.
The thing is, ironically, A View to a Kill was the first Bond that I saw. I remember we had recorded, as we did in those days, it had been recorded off telly, it had been on ITV the night before, too late for past my bedtime. So I remember rushing back from school to watch it on VHS. And we were just completely unaware of
His age.
Of how old he was.
It wasn't until later on that we figured out what the hell.
Who's this old guy perving over, women in their 20s and running around like an action star?
Hello, Stacey.
Yes, well, you get your clothes on, and I'll buy you an ice cream.
And there's a very good book that I read recently that is all about that whole sort of growing up in an era of discovering Bond, in an era of there's bank holiday showings of VHS of what was available in the local video shop called Catching Bullets. It's Memoirs of a Bond Fan by a guy called Mark O'Connell, and it's very touching, very funny, and it's all about he actually falls in love with Roger Moore, and again he's that sort of like he watches them all out of sequence, and a bit like us, he grew up with Roger.
Only Connery and Moore.
Well, yeah, but Moore was his Bond. And I was like, hang on, there's another guy doing it? Who's this other who's the Scottish guy? And yeah, that was, for a long time, that was, even when the Dalton films came out, you and I were saying this, we were still watching all the Moore ones.
It was always, when Dalton was in the cinema, Moore was on the telly, so it was a big it was very hard to beat that.
Yeah, and I think, we have a lot of love for Dalton. I may go as far as arguing he's the best Bond.
Living Daylights is definitely top 5 for me.
Yeah, me too. And he was doing what Daniel Craig was doing now, or 25 years later, that it was that sort of
thespian take.
Yeah, jumping away from the whole broad strokes that Roger Moore brought. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more to say about A View to a Kill, because I think we are more than likely to cover it.
I think it'll probably be one of the first ones we go to because of our love of Christopher Walken.
There's a lot of comedy value in that.
Yeah, there's going to be some banter, so don't be surprised if A View to a Kill
crops up sooner or later.
What a title! Just so much to say. Anyway, so
yeah, and then I suppose moving on, we briefly talked about sort of in terms of other films he did. So you talked about North Sea Hijack, Cannonball Run.
Of course, yeah, he popped up in that.
Playing a man who had surgery to look like Roger Moore / James Bond. So again,
self-aware.
Yeah, Roger was always more than happy to send himself up. I really want to check out one film he did called The Wild Geese, which is like a sort of war movie with Richard Harris and Richard Burton.
That's been recommended to me as well. So we should sit down and watch
a Boy's Own sort of type thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that to check out. Apparently, according to Roger Moore, his best performance that he thought, the performance he was most happy with, was a film he did in the 70s called The Man Who Haunted Himself, which I haven't seen.
It's meant to be batshit crazy. Yeah, we definitely got to check that out after a few shandies.
Where is a man who's being hunted by his doppelganger. So, sounds interesting. And then after Bond, he really didn't do much. He was mainly sort of, probably sending himself up in celebrity appearances.
Doing a lot of charity work.
Yeah, he as I said, he became a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF. He was referred to by Audrey Hepburn, and he did a huge amount for UNICEF right up until his last days.
When did he receive his knighthood?
I think it was 2002.
Yeah, but that must be linked with his charity work.
Yes, obviously that was linked. But apparently he was very humble, and he always insisted, unlike some people, Ben Kingsley, he always told people, don't call him sir, drop the sir. He was very much an everyman, and from all the obituaries and articles that have come out in the past few days, not a single person has a bad word to say about him. He seemed like he was, a legend he was a true gentleman in real life as well as on screen.
Yeah, I think, I think we're probably wrapping up here in terms of my final thoughts on Sir Roger, or he sometimes says, please call me Charlie, but I think that, Connery, they are all Bond to us. They are larger than life. They're more than characters, but out of all of them, he's the one who... The difference between his character and him in real life is very hard.
The lines are blurred.
Yeah, the lines are very blurred. I mean, I think that review that you passed on to me about how, even as I've gone through my life, my opinion of the Roger Moore as Bond. I'm sorry we're focusing on Bond, but that's just the way we are. My opinion of his films has changed. You know, I loved them as a kid. Then as like in my 20s, kind of said, yeah, but they were just all ridiculous and silly. And now, and more recently, it's like, yeah, it's weird because a lot of people have said, can we now all finally admit that he was the best Bond?
Well, that was the Daily Mash article.
It was the Daily Mash who said that. And in a way, when I sit there and think about it, it's like, yeah, love him or hate him, the original Sean Connery, yes, obviously he is the best because it was the first, it was the most original, but he didn't make as many films. And when we grew up with Roger Moore. He had the gadgets, he had the music, and when we were getting into Bond, us personally, he was Bond. So,
well, and that's it. As we've touched on, the Bonds reflect what's happening in society at the time, and films at the time, and they sort of move with those times. And the most recent, the Daniel Craig films are getting a lot of stick for being a sort of, a clone of the Bourne films, and that gritty sort of
reactive.
Yeah, they're very reactive. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I don't think a lot of the blame for those films, the Roger Moore films are very much an era of that sort of people wanted light entertainment, they wanted tongue-in-cheek.
I can't think of other action films around the time that were bettering Bond. They were riding high for a reason. Nobody else was giving the exotic locations, the great cars, the good-looking girls,
the
stunts, the ridiculous plots, the villains. So nobody else was doing it. We now live in a very different world. The Cold War was, teetering out sort of thing. So but they still found a way to give it credence, and making just him as a character, Roger Moore. What made him love him so much is when he came out and said about, I always used to think that Connery was the best Bond, but recently I have to say it's Daniel Craig. That is someone he's like, come on, I did what I did, but from a theatrical point of view, Connery was the best, and Craig has inhibited him, just as well.
Or as he said, Sean was the killer, I was the lover.
So Roger, we salute you.
Indeed,
you've been such a large part of our lives. I don't think there is any other franchise that I've invested movie watching hours with, and you will never be forgotten.
Yeah, I think obviously there's been some other terrible news this week with what happened in Manchester, and I think it was the same day, but. So yeah, it was a rotten day for news, but it really did, for me, it felt like almost losing like an
old chum.
A grandfather, a fond uncle. But yes, I think the magic of cinema will always have...
He'll live on forever.
Yes, we'll always be able to spend a bank holiday afternoon or evening with Sir Roger Moore.
And on that note, we're going to leave you, and we're going to get ourselves a nice little drink and sit down and watch The Spy Who Loved Me, aren't we?
Yeah, we are indeed, and to a salute to one of our favourite Bonds.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. We will be back as usual with the episodes. Keep watching. If you've got any thoughts, please, about Roger.
Favourite Moore moments.
Yeah, favourite Moore moments. Get us on our blog or on our Facebook page or on Twitter. It's important to us, and I'm sure it's important to a lot of you. So
thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on our next proper episode, which is going to be The Goonies.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Richard Donner classic.
Thanks for your time.
So that was part 1 of our tribute to Sir Roger Moore. Part 2 will be available next week and will feature an exclusive interview with Mark O'Connell, hosted by RetroRamble's very own George McGhee. As we mentioned earlier, Mark is the author of the highly acclaimed novel Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan. It's a must-read for any serious Bond fan anyway. Very funny as well. In the interview, George talks to Mark about what goes on behind the scenes of a Bond film, what it was like to meet Sir Roger, and where he sees the franchise going next, being a member of the Eon family himself. So that's part 2, an interview with Mark O'Connell, available on retroramble.blog, iTunes, YouTube, and all the other channels, probably by next week. Until then, thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye-bye.